All right, awesome. I'm seeing attendees now up here. It's not just us. All right, we'll give a couple minutes for everyone to be let in, and then we will start. Yeah, we'll probably start at 35. And just kind of, I'm sure, thanks to our virtual setting, you guys are pretty familiar with these sort of webinars, but we were expecting kind of a big crowd, so we have a webinar format, which means that there's a chat feature for you guys to ask any questions that might come up or use the Q&A. I believe you can ask anonymous or have your name associated. Oh, there's also a raise hand function. I don't know how
Melinda,
to.
just FYI, I believe the chat is disabled, but the Q&A box is open for all Q&A. So I
Perfect.
believe chat is disabled for participants, but they can submit their questions via Q&A.
Thanks, Jackie. You can tell I haven't done a webinar in a bit. I guess I misspoke. Allison, I do see that you have your hand raised. Oh, you could.
You can go ahead and unmute.
That was an accident.
Oh, perfect.
I was testing. I was looking for the chat.
Well, I learned something new. Well, thank you.
Great. Well, maybe we can go ahead and get started. It looks like there's about 26 people here today. My name's Aaron Fucello. I'm the Associate Director here at ISSS. I see some familiar names in the attendee list. Wanted to thank you all for coming. This is the beginner training for department contacts for iPenn. We started this, I think last year, Melinda? Yeah. Oh, Melinda, sorry. Did you want to introduce yourself?
I can introduce myself for my portion.
We started this last year. We're trying to kind of get out some more workshops and I guess training programs to help everyone sort of do their side of the immigration processing a little bit easier and kind of focus on some pain points that people have identified. So hopefully this is helpful. It's not just for beginners. If you have some experience doing this, I still think you can benefit. So the agenda for today, I'm going to be going over foreign national categories, and then we'll move into more of a how-to section on iPenn, focus on some common problems that people have or have been having with iPenn lately. Melinda's going to take that over. I do a lot of immigration processing and a lot of immigration advising. And Melinda is really focused on the technical side of, or the technology side and technical side of our systems and our processes and our data and all that good stuff. So hopefully you get a more of a well-rounded view on not just immigration, but also on the actual steps and processes that we need to do in order to bring foreign nationals to Penn, mainly as scholars or employees, but I think a lot of this could apply to the student side as well. And hopefully we'll have time for questions. I think, I don't want to speak for Melinda, but from my experience, these types of, like this type of forum works best if it's more of a conversation between us and you. We don't just want to lecture to you. We want you to be involved and to ask questions. So please feel free throughout this to either raise your hand or unmute and ask questions, or if you have any other issues that you've been noticing, please bring them up. So we would really appreciate it. I think having a question answer or more of a dialogue is helpful for everyone. So foreign national category overview. Immigration statuses in iPenn. The two most common immigration status statuses you'll see in the Scholar world are J1 and H1B. The J1 is the exchange visitor category. It's very, very temporary category. So you'll see this for Penn positions like visiting scholar, postdoctoral researcher, other types of visiting faculty. There are several categories under the J1 umbrella. So J1 is the overarching status, and then we have different categories within the J1 umbrella. Essentially, when you're looking at immigration law, you're looking to the activities the person will be doing in the US to determine what type of status you want to bring them in. For J1s and at Penn, you're really looking towards research, collaboration, even observation of how labs or departments do certain things. You're thinking, though, I think in the J1 context, I know they're very helpful to Penn, but in my mind, I always think J1 exchange visitors are usually here to, as a career building, honestly, as a career building experience. So you're looking like, again, a postdoctoral researcher. They're not coming here to get rich as a postdoc. They're coming here for training, and they're coming here to really improve their qualifications and their CV. So I hope that's helpful for you. For H1Bs, we're thinking employees, we're thinking staff, we're thinking faculty. For J1s, we are not thinking staff and faculty. You cannot bring a staff or faculty member here on a J1. Processing times for work authorization. So the big difference between H1B and J1 is that J1s are processed in-house. We adjudicate them here at ISSS. So essentially, you'll submit your documents to us and we'll review them. We'll let you know if we need any additional documents, but we will process the immigration document at ISSS. That document will then be sent to the scholar if they're abroad, or you can come pick it up. If it's like an extension, we don't really need to send those. H1Bs, on the other hand, are sent to the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is an agency within Department of Homeland Security. So obviously there's more steps there. There's more moving parts. We need to make sure that what we submit to them is consistent, is accurate, and it takes a bit of time. So we ask for 6 to 7 months, but no less than 90 days. So, 3 months, if we really need it, with it at least 3 months in advance to process and file it. And we do have a late fee if they're submitted 2 months or less from the start date. For H1B, we're able to use premium processing, which speeds up government processing to 15 business days. 15 business days to hear back from them. They still need to send us a hard copy approval notice, which can take a week or two, as they send them through USPS. It just takes a bit of time. And that kind of goes to another point, which is that sometimes there are factors which are outside of our control. For example, how long it takes to get an approval notice. Sometimes that can take 2 weeks. Like I said, shipping the approval notice to the person if they're overseas, sometimes that can get delayed. So basically, the more time we have to process these, the better. And yeah, it makes for a much less stressful experience if we're able to have some time to send them in. On the other hand, I realize that you guys are under all kinds of deadlines and pressures as well. You probably have faculty which are screaming at you to get this done tomorrow. So we do understand and we work with you, but it's not that we want to sort of, sit around and take our time and kind of read these leisurely. It's just that it takes some time to process these, to prepare them correctly, to send them in, to get the approval notice back. Long story short, the more time you give us, the better for H1B. If you could go back one slide, for J1s, we ask that we ask for 6 weeks to process. Again, we know that it takes that you guys are under pressure. We can work with you to do it quicker, but we do ask for 6 weeks, a month. If you could give us that would be great. Different exchange visitor categories. So again, someone could be on a J1, but they can be in several different categories within J1. So there's a J1 category for au pairs who come to the US to take care of people's kids. Obviously, that's very different than the types of J1s we sponsor at UPenn. The most common categories we sponsor are research scholar, professor, which are very, very similar. Short-term scholar, which is essentially a research scholar, but with a time limit, and a student intern. They're a little bit less popular, and they're much more involved, to be honest. So a research scholar, I would say the vast majority of our J1s at Penn are research scholars. They're coming here to engage in research, teaching, observing, consulting, and lecturing. That is like, you know, that's Penn in a nutshell right there, especially for our exchange visitor program. They need to be here for at least 3 weeks. These are extendable for up to 5 years. Many departments have a rule that the initial appointment should be 1 year, and then we can extend for multiple years afterwards. But it really depends on the department on that rule. We could, from an immigration standpoint, we could issue these for up to 5 years from the beginning. Again, most Penn departments say 1 year to start to make sure they like the person, they're a good fit, blah, blah, blah. All of our postdoctoral researchers are here as research scholars. That's why I say that it's for sure the most common type of J1 that we sponsor here at Penn. The short-term scholar, on the other hand, I don't want to say it's more popular in specific departments, but it's really a research scholar who's coming here for 6 months or less. That's the point of the short-term scholar program. So they're doing the same thing: lecture, observe, consult, participate in seminars, workshops, conferences, so on. But it's limited to 6 months, and it cannot be extended. You can't do it for 6 months and say, we really like this person, can we extend for a year? Nope, 6 months. That the system won't even let us extend it beyond 6 months. You also can't have them come as a short-term scholar, then leave and return as a short-term scholar immediately after leaving. That's kind of just a way around extending. So if you know the person is coming for 6 months or less and there's no way they're going to extend, then a short-term scholar is a good option. You're probably thinking, why can't we just do a research scholar and then limit it to 6 months? There is something called a bar to reentry that attaches to research scholar programs. If someone comes as a research scholar and then leaves, they end their research scholar program, they're not allowed to come back as a research scholar for 2 years. So it's not a great idea. And that bar does not attach to short-term scholars. So it's a great idea, if you know it will be 6 months or less, to use the short-term scholar option. Unfortunately, I'm working with a department right now who did a short-term scholar program. And then they said, wow, this guy's great, fantastic fit. We'll just issue another short-term scholar DS 2019 immigration document and they can just stay. That is not true. So we can't extend beyond 6 months, and that's really important to remember. And that can really mess up someone's plans, short and long term. If you bring them on a short-term scholar and they want to stay for a year. The student intern category is for students who are enrolled in a program abroad, who are coming to Penn really to do an internship that is integral to their research or to their home program. So they're enrolled abroad and they're coming in for up to 12 months per degree level. It's pretty popular, I would say. We need an official student intern placement agreement. It's part of the application. You'll see it if you start one of their cases in iPenn. It's a bit more involved because you need that placement agreement. You need their home institution to sign off on it and basically confirm that the student is enrolled at their institution studying, and they're expected to come back after their time at Penn to finish their degree requirements. But the student intern program is pretty popular and it's used quite a bit. Another important thing to remember with J1 is there are funding requirements. It's not very much funding, but it's still required. So minimum funding amount is $27,180 per year. That is what we need to show in order to be able to issue the immigration document, essentially, is that they will have at least that amount of money for their stay. Again, this is department specific, but sometimes this can be self-funded. School of Medicine is, you can't be self-funded, basically. They have a lot more restrictions on who can come as a visiting scholar or a visiting professor, or basically come on a J1. There's also, for postdocs, those funding amounts are very much different. I think it's about $50,000 for funding for a postdoctoral researcher. So yeah, all of this information is on our website and up to date. I could pull up the postdoc funding amount, but it is a lot more than for, say, a visiting scholar. So could you just go back to that previous slide? This provides some possible funding sources. Again, it doesn't have to be funding from Penn. It doesn't have to be a Penn paycheck. It can come from their home country. It can come from their home institution. It can come from NIH. It can come from Penn, from different grants at Penn, or from just the department at Penn. Yeah, it can come from many different places, but we need to make sure that it's essentially meeting department requirements. There are immigration requirements. There are also department and Penn requirements. They don't always link up. As you can see, it can come from many different places in immigration, but from Penn, sometimes it has to be from the department or from a grant funding. All right, next slide, please.
Aaron, just really quickly, while we go to the next slide, there are 2 questions in the Q&A related to H-1Bs, just to give you a heads up when you talk about H-1Bs.
Sure, let's take a look at those really quick. Alex said, for a scholar already at Penn who's being hired and now needs an H-1B, is there a deadline for when they need their H-1B? I would refer to those previous processing time requirements that I brought up on the previous slide. Basically, if a scholar already at Penn who's being hired now needs an H-1B, so I'm assuming that they're on in a different immigration status. We could file for something called a change of status, which means they're here, they're maintaining their status. So please change their status to a different type of status so they can stay at Penn. If you request a change of status, you need the change of status to be approved before the person can begin working in that status. Let me see if I can explain that better. If someone's J1 is expiring on December 15th, we need an H-1B approved for December 16th in order for them to continue working. If it's not approved by that date, they have to stop working and wait until the change of status gets approved. So we still need to factor in those timelines so that we can get an approval notice and they can get I-9 verified with the new immigration document so that they can continue working. So I would say, again, give us like 4 months if you can. If you know this person's on a J1, their J1 status is expiring, and we want to continue employing them in a different status, I would say give us 4 months if you can for a change of status to be approved. If you're just extending their J, I think 6 weeks, maybe that's a little bit excessive. I would say a month. If you can let us know a month before, that's great. It's an extension with no changes. We'll still need updated documents to show that they meet all of these requirements, like funding and a new appointment letter. So I hope that answers your question. It kind of depends on what you're requesting. Are you just requesting a basic extension, or are you requesting a whole change of status or an amendment to what they're doing here? The other thing I wanted to mention, though, is if you have questions on this, please reach out to ISSS. You can email us directly. All of our email addresses are on our website, and it's we have a great group of people here who are basically, this is our job, is to answer these types of questions. anonymous attendee said, has the wait time for USCIS response for an H-1B petition gotten shorter in the past year? No, it's gotten longer. It's just one of those things, like I said, that's outside of our control, except in the H-1B world, we can request premium processing. And that's the only way to guarantee a specific time period for adjudication with USCIS. So I've heard it referred to, and I've sometimes thought of it as sort of like a bribe almost. You're paying the person $2,500 to do their work in 2 weeks. But it's a nice tool to have if we can afford it, because it really moves the wait from at least 6 months at this point to 15 business days, which is a huge difference. And yeah, I encourage premium processing at almost all H-1B cases. Great. Allison, my section radiology is anticipating a new hire as a fellow for July 2023. We'll expect she'll need an H-1B. Can she not begin work if we don't have the paperwork completed by 7/1/2023? It feels tight already. This brings up a good point. H-1Bs, we can only begin processing them 6 months before the expected start date. So I think that's a good timeline, 7/1/2023. But I would get started after the holidays on that case if you can. If you can't, February, March, that still gives us time to process it. Fellow, I'm not so sure if that's an H-1B. I'm not sure if that's an employee of the university or if that would be more appropriate for a J1. But that's something we would have to look into. And again, check with ISSS before you start processing that case so we can talk about what the best strategy would be. I'm not sure. I guess we could do, yeah, I think we've done fellows for medicine before on H-1B. Great questions. Thanks for asking. I really like to hear. We think these are issues that come up, but we don't work on the department side. So hearing from you guys is extremely helpful for us, and hopefully helpful for you as well. One other concept with J1 is mandatory insurance. So we talked about H-1Bs being employees of the university and eligible for normal benefits like insurance. J1s are not, but they are required, well, in some cases. Postdocs have their own postdoctoral health insurance program. Other J1 exchange visitors, though, will need to have insurance, basically health insurance, for the time they're in the United States. It makes sense. The government doesn't want people to come to the US and be in the US without health insurance. It's pretty straightforward. Within 30 days of arrival, all J1 visiting scholars, student interns are required to purchase health insurance. They can either purchase a pre-selected plan or they can waive out of the coverage requirement by showing that they have their own health insurance. We contracted with a company called Gallagher. It used to be called Garnet Powers, essentially to help with this because it's such a mess. But Gallagher is good. They're very responsive, and they have plans that meet the J1 regulatory requirements. We have a link to their website on our website. They have a portal where you can either purchase a plan, you can submit your current health insurance to see if it meets all of the requirements, or if you need to purchase additional portions of health insurance. Basically, they make it a lot easier to be in compliance with the health insurance requirements. But J1 visiting scholars are required to have health insurance for their J1 program. So really need to make sure that they have that. If they don't, then they're not in status. They're out of status, and that's a big problem for compliance with the university. And like I said, postdocs are eligible for the postdoc health insurance program, and that meets the J1 requirements. It's a great option for postdocs because it's just so much easier than trying to figure out our country's kind of, quite frankly, insane health insurance program. For questions regarding coverage, you can reach out to Gallagher directly. Like I said, we're contracted with them, so we pay them, and they are responsive. They're great. I highly recommend reaching out to them if you have any specific questions about which health insurance a scholar may need. Scholars can reach out to them directly as well. They're just a really good resource for this. Great, so that was J1. Again, J1s, you're really thinking like really temporary visiting trainees, postdoctoral researchers, visiting scholar, visiting professor, student interns. They're coming for a short period of time to train at Penn, to contribute to Penn, to collaborate with Penn faculty and staff, and then to leave. That is a requirement that you're not allowed to stay indefinitely on a J1. The other really most common, you're going to see J1 and H1B if you're processing cases, immigration cases for your department. H1B specialty occupation workers. This is employees of the University of Pennsylvania. So this is faculty and staff. You cannot be a faculty or staff member on a J1 visa. One thing I forgot to mention is all postdoctoral researchers at the University of Pennsylvania are required to be on a J1. If a potential postdoc says, I'd like to come in a different status, you would need a waiver of that rule. We may get into that in a couple slides, but all postdocs at Penn required to be on a J1. That's a university policy unless an exception is granted. H1B, employer-employee relationship is the key here. So faculty and staff, temporary professional worker, specific to the position and employer. So all of the job details, if any of them change, we should have a conversation before they change about whether we need to make an amendment to an existing H1B. I would say it's probably the most common issue that I see on a day-to-day basis with immigration at Penn is someone changed to a different position and we never amended their H1B. Very difficult to fix after the fact, pretty straightforward to fix before any changes happen. So I always tell employees who are on an H1, reach out to me if anything's changing, or reach out to your department contact and they should reach out to ISSS, but you need to let us know if anything's changing. And I think I would love if you take that away from this presentation today, is that you need to reach out. Please reach out. That's what we're here for. If we don't need to change anything or do anything, that's fine. We'll just talk about it. If we do need to change something, then we had the conversation and we'll do what we need to do. The hard thing is when you reach out and you say, Melinda was working as a research specialist A. 2 years ago, she changed to associate professor. That's a big problem for compliance purposes. So please reach out. If you think things are changing with someone's employment and they're on an H1B, please reach out beforehand. The key big picture, and of course there are many details that we need to focus on, but the key with H1B is a minimum of a bachelor's degree requirement for the job in a specific field. That's like that's the big hurdle that we need to get over. Obviously, we'll focus on details as well, but bachelor's degree in a specific field, probably eligible, almost definitely eligible for H1B. Specific field is important. So if you say that this job requires a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, medicine, law, and English literature, that's a big problem as well. It needs to be in specific field. The more specific, the better. I know there's cross-functional areas of research, and Penn is big on that, and I think that's amazing. But we just need to focus on it, and we need to try to paint a picture for the USCIS, for the government, about why there's a degree requirement in a specific field. That's really what an H1B boils down to. So, try to keep those big picture issues in mind when you're processing these. It's important to be detail oriented, but it's also important not to forget big picture. The H1B employee must meet the minimum qualifications for the position at the time we file. So for example, if the job requires a PhD and we're filing, but the person doesn't have their PhD yet, that's a big problem. they need to be eligible at the time we file. Yeah, that's another big picture issue as well. Much like the minimum required funding for J1, there is a minimum wage that needs to be paid to H-1B workers. It's either the prevailing wage or the actual wage, whichever one is higher. The prevailing wage is the wage paid to similarly situated employees in a specific occupation in the area of intended employment. So it basically looks to the median wage for workers who are in a specific field in a specific area. Let's just say, for example, lawyer. We're going to look to Department of Labor data on what lawyers are paid in Philadelphia area. And we need to meet that minimum wage. The idea here is that you don't want to underpay foreign workers. It's going to hurt the wage requirements for US workers if we start paying foreign workers less just because we can. So they're trying to keep, they're trying to prevent, basically trying to prevent us from underpaying foreign workers. That's the point of this requirement. The actual wage, so for, if, for example, we're paying research specialist Bs a certain wage in this lab or in this department, this foreign worker would have to be paid that same amount of, even if the actual wage is higher than the prevailing wage, we need to pay whichever one is higher. It's kind of hard to explain, but essentially there's a required wage. We will determine what it is, and we will let the department know if the stated wage that they're trying to pay is too low. All right, application overview. So premium processing, as I mentioned before, is strongly recommended for all cases. There are some instances where it's not needed. It's still slightly recommended, I would say, just because if something's pending for 7 or 8 months, it can be very stressful for the employee. It can be stressful for the department as well if you don't know if this person will be able to stay. With premium processing, we'll have an answer in 15 days, and then we can all move on. We have, hopefully it's an approval notice for 3 years. It's just it's a nice tool to use, I would say, premium processing. It is, however, $2,500. So it's by far the most significant fee associated with H-1B processing. It's almost $1,000 more than ISSS processing fee. So it's a lot of money, basically, for what it is. But hopefully we can work that into the budget. It does. Some people will say, "Hey, we're doing premium processing. Why is it taking ISSS a month? You said it would be 15 days." It does not speed up ISSS processing. We don't see any of the premium processing fee. So, we still have the same processing times that I discussed before. Even if we're using premium processing, our advisors are on the same page as far as understanding when a case needs to be filed. We also updated our H-1B forms. If it's an urgent case for some reason and it has to be, or really want it to be done by a specific date, you can tell us the reason why. Like we're trying to work with you and we're trying to get things done. But like I said, sometimes there are things outside of our control. As I mentioned before, regular processing is at least 6 months, I would say right now. We don't file too many cases with regular processing because it takes so long. Most people just say, we'll just do premium. So, 6, 7, 8 months or 15 days, basically, with premium processing. This last point, allow additional time if employee needs to obtain a US visa, is so relevant today. Honestly, since the beginning of the pandemic, the consulates around the world have been completely in complete mess. Department of State keeps telling us that they're getting back to normal and that they should be applauded for this, but in reality and in practice and what I'm seeing is they're still a complete mess. So for a while they weren't even doing visa interviews. They weren't even conducting interviews. And they were backlogged before the pandemic. So you can imagine after a couple months of being completely closed, how backlogged they are now. They have certain restrictions in place that for COVID, basically for COVID reasons, that you're not, maybe not as many people are allowed in the waiting room, or there, restrictions on how many in-person interviews they can do a day. Long story short, they're still a mess, and it takes a long time in most places to get a visa interview. So if the person is abroad, let's say hypothetically this person is in France, they're coming to work at Penn on July 1st, 2023. Before, once an H-1B case was approved, the person could schedule a visa interview, I don't know, in a week, a couple days. They would take their H-1B approval letters, they would go, they would get the visa within a couple days usually, and then they would schedule a flight into the US. Now we've had to pivot and sort of say, you can schedule this visa interview far in advance. You're only going to have options for like a year from now. So just book the closest available visa appointment. Then we'll request an expedited appointment. We'll need a letter from the department. It's just become quite a mess. So if the person's abroad and needs to obtain a US visa, I would recommend getting these started as early as possible, because really because of this last part, the visa processing part is just taking forever. So yeah, something to keep in mind.
Aaron, do you want to answer the Q&A question?
Sure. Dina, oh, you already answered. Dina, yes, we will send out these slides just so you guys know at the end, so you'll have them to refer to. Is there another question in here? I'm missing it.
About if someone was hired into a new position that requires an H-1B, would their start date be dependent on the H-1B approval?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm missing that. I think I understand this correctly. The answer is yes. So if they're moving into a new position, they're being reclassified or promoted or whatever you want to call it, they really shouldn't be promoted. Their start date in their new position should be conditional upon their H-1B amendment being filed. So I talked about some specific circumstances where premium processing isn't really required. This may be one of them. So if we're filing an amended petition, the person can begin employment in the new position on the date that we file the amendment. In reality, we wait till we receive a receipt notice. So it's usually about a week or so after we file, maybe 2 weeks after we file, that we get this receipt notice. And once that receipt notice is received, the person can begin working in their new position. We don't really need to use premium processing in this case because the person's able to continue working until the amendment is approved. So basically, we just have to file it, and then the person can begin working, and they can continue working in the new position as long as it's pending. That may be a situation where we don't have to use premium processing. However, the person should not begin working in the new position until we file, until we receive a receipt notice. It's a great question. And you can see how H-1B can, it seems so simple. I talked about big picture, but there's always moving parts, and there are always different strategies that you can use, which again, reach out to ISSS. We could talk about these strategies. Melinda and Amanda and Jackie, who are all on here, will let you, I'm sure would tell you that I'd really enjoy talking about these strategies and different options for immigration. Employer-sponsored permanent residency, you'll potentially come across this as well if you're processing immigration cases. Permanent residency is a green card. I'm sure you've all heard of green cards. The technical name for it is a permanent resident of the United States. Two options: we can process at ISSS for special handling for teaching faculty. Really, it's for any job at Penn that has a teaching component. They need to be teaching Penn students. We can process it at ISSS, the green card. It's cheaper, it's a bit quicker, it's a lot less stressful and onerous than other green card options. Any other green card case is going to go to one of two law firms that we work with, our outside legal counsel program. They work on all other different types of green cards. I'm not going to get into the details in this presentation about specific types of green cards, but there are many different ways you can get one through the employment-based option. And basically, I'll work with you, I'll work with the employee, and I'll work with outside counsel to determine what the best one is, and then get the case opened with the law firm to process. Special handling, like I mentioned, is if there's a teaching component to the job. The key here is we need to file a specific application with Department of Labor within 18 months of the job offer. Usually we do the date on the offer letter for faculty as their selection date. Why is this key? It's because it takes a lot of work to get to the point where we can file that application. So it says here the prep time is currently 10 months. I would say more like even 11 at this point. And that is pretty much all because Department of Labor is understaffed and underfunded, and it takes them 11 months to get back to us before we're even eligible to file that application within 18 months of the hire. So basically, if you have a faculty or a staff member who has a teaching component, and you know you're going to be sponsoring permanent residency for them, reach out as soon as possible so that we can take a look and see if we can file in-house to save some time and money. If you reach out even like 6 months after they're hired, it may be too late for this option at this point, which is just insane. This about 10-month processing time when I started here at Penn was 3 months. So it's tripled at least, probably more, maybe quadrupled at this point, which is crazy. So yeah, if you know you're sponsoring a faculty member or someone who's teaching, please reach out as soon as possible for a permanent residency. Another thing to think about is for staff positions, for PR, we don't sponsor staff positions for PR unless an exception is granted to this rule. You can email me or Donna Steinfeld at our office or Chiwei Huangma at our office to request an exception. We need to reach out to HR and request an exception to this rule that we don't sponsor green cards for staff positions. Essentially, we need a letter from the department explaining why we should make an exception. For example, this type of work is extremely unique and the person is qualified, uniquely qualified for this position. Or the person has just been contributing and they've contributed in this way and that way, X, Y, and Z. But basically, we need to get an exception, and we need to show that the person is exceptional and they deserve an exception. And here again, I referenced our two outside law firms, Goldblum and Pollins. Oh, it's Goldblum, Pollins, and Dennis now. Kristen Dennis got promoted. It looks like that's great. Really fantastic law firm. They're in Jenkintown. Really smart, compassionate attorneys. Just phenomenal. Really. I can't say anything bad about Clasco either. They're really, really good law firm. Only do immigration law. Great attorneys. I can't recommend one over the other. We're really lucky that we get to work with these two firms. And like I said, for green card cases that will go to one of these two firms, we will reach out to them and we'll all kind of get together and figure out what the best strategy is before we move forward. So reach out if you have questions about green cards or permanent residency cases, and we'll be in touch with one of these two firms. And I think this is my final slide, the PR e-form, the new e-form. Melinda worked on this. So happy to have it. Used to be a PDF that you emailed to me and that I missed in my email, and then you angrily followed up with me about. Now it's an e-form, so it's located on the employee's case page in iPenn. So if you log in, say I'm working here on an H-1B, you would log into Aaron Fuccello's iPenn page, and there would be a button there that says, I think, begin permanent residency case. You can submit that PR case. It's automatically assigned to an advisor, and then we review and we'll be in touch and hopefully get the case opened with one of the two law firms or request some additional information if we need it. It's only available for employees at Penn. You can email us if it's like a new employee. Usually it's a faculty member that you know you're sponsoring for permanent residency, but you don't have an iPenn page for, basically. Yeah, and like I say, we'll review and we'll get back to you about what the best strategy would be, or if we should have a call with the law firm. And fees are very much dependent on what type of case we move forward with. I would say for permanent residency, you're going to want to budget $10,000 from start to finish for a green card case.
Aaron, there is another Q&A about J1s.
Another Q&A about J1s just open. If someone is issued a J1 visa ahead of schedule abroad, can we issue a new DS 2019 with an earlier start date? That way they can come to the US and start at Penn earlier than originally planned. I would not recommend doing that. When they get to the US, they will present their visa, they will present their DS 2019, their immigration document, and their passport to CBP. If their DS 2019 and visa are inconsistent with what's in CVIS, the record that CBP is looking at, there will probably be an issue with them being admitted. So in other words, we need to send a hard copy DS 2019 to people abroad. We need to update CVIS. If they get a visa and then we change, they get a visa based on a DS 2019, and then we change what's in CVIS and issue another DS 2019, but they have the old visa, there could be red flags and problems. I would stick to the original start date in that situation. Yeah, hope that answers the question. Ooh, okay. That's my portion. Melinda, I'm going to turn it over to you for tech side.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm just going to go over some just kind of iPenn tips and tricks I think are useful to share with department contacts to kind of hopefully make the work that you're doing easier and kind of make the whole process a little bit smoother. Yeah, so some of this might be, if you don't already have iPenn access, or there's somebody who is looking to get iPenn access in your department, we have a new tutorial that we put up about within the past 18 months. Jackie's voice is on it. It's great. And these are kind of just the instructions on how someone can get iPenn access by watching this knowledge link tutorial. And then at the end, they get a little notification to submit a form to our office that is then reviewed, and we grant proper permissions and access. The great thing about, knowledge link is that the tutorial is always going to be there. So sometimes I've even referenced it to see, what we're telling BAs and kind of making sure that the language is clear. So even once you complete it, you can always go back and rewatch it if something was unclear. There's a bunch of different advice in here, kind of about how to add a case and different aspects of different applications. It's just additional, some tips I talk about here are also covered in this eForm tutorial, and it can be useful once you complete it once. Like if you have to submit an H1B but usually do J1s, you can just rewatch the H1B section for a little refresher. How to sign into iPenn. If you guys are all new, this is probably super basic, but some people actually have our old sign-in bookmarked, and I am on a campaign to kind of remove that hardwired bookmark link. And instead, I'm trying to push that people will add in our Welcome to iPenn page from our website, and that the reminder that it's the red button that we use to sign in for department representative. If you try to use the blue button, it will try and look you up as a student. And unfortunately, some people have that blue button bookmarked. So this is just a reminder of the usefulness of how to sign into iPenn. This is visual compliance is associated with processing J1s, J1 scholars, and requesting them. There is export control, sorry, I couldn't remember the department. Export control does require that we complete visual compliance based on any sort of scholar that we're looking to bring to the to Penn, or even if you're doing an extension for existing Scholar. So there's a related knowledge link to get access to visual compliance. And then after you pass the course, export control will be notified, and they will be able to answer sort of any questions about, what visual compliance is. My understanding is, you're looking up the Scholar that you're looking to bring, you look it up in the visual compliance system once you sign in, and then you're just making sure that there's no flags or concerns about why you couldn't bring this person here. I'll show a screenshot later of what that kind of looks like in our eForm and how we capture it. I will say that export control does monitor who's completing visual compliance. So if you check on the eForm with us that you did and what date you did it, but you didn't actually do it, they will know and they will reach out. So that's it's something we've added at their request within the past couple of years to ensure that the university is maintaining compliance with their broader research community. So this might seem basic, but there's actually a lot of information here that I wanted to kind of touch upon. So the biggest thing about how to navigate your cases. So this is what you see when you sign into iPenn. And my first kind of thing I want to call out is that I and we at ISS strongly don't recommend that you use the My Current Cases, which is blocked out here on the left. That header is created by the vendor and is actually pretty glitchy, and it can be really confusing. We've noticed that a lot of cases appear twice in there. Some of them are blank, some look like you haven't started anything at all. And we currently don't have control over it. We're looking into ways how to actually make it beneficial for departments. But until then, we really just ignore it. It's not even there. Instead, just click on departmental services. For this is entirely managed by our office, and we control it as much as possible. On my departmental services, this is an example if you have more than one department associated with you. And so for this test example, it has ISS testing and Penn Abroad, and you can kind of see just a general overview of how many cases are pending and approved. And then underneath there's a bunch of different alerts notifications. So if there's verifications past due, you can get an overall summary of those different verifications, who's due for check-in, who's ending soon, and whose verification is due soon. As well as you also have the button here to add a new case. And I'll kind of talk about adding a new case, I believe, next. But oh, yeah. Oh, no, apparently it's not next. Maybe it's after this. Okay. So that other page is what you see kind of if you have more than one department. But if you have one department or you click on your department, you kind of see your case list in this manner. And this is a list of of H-1Bs associated with this department, H-1Bs and J-1s or any immigration type, specifically looking at the School of Medicine at the Cardiovascular Medicine, that's the department name. And as you can see here on the right, I just have a screenshot of 6 cases that are associated with this department. And you can see that there's a variety of different department contacts who are working or assigned to each case. And even though, Denise is assigned to one of those cases, Denise actually also has access to Cheryl or Colleen's cases. And so, because they're all associated with the same department. The idea is, if something happens to Cheryl and she maybe needs to take leave or she's away on vacation, Denise or Colleen or other people in her department can access and complete the applications on their behalf. So this is now case page basics. And so when you're on your overall view, when you're in your department, so this currently department view I'm in is ISS testing, it kind of breaks it up between incoming cases, pending cases, and approved cases. So incoming means that you haven't completed the application yet. You're still working through it. You haven't submitted it to our office. Pending cases, you've submitted to our office, but we haven't processed it yet. Pending cases means that it has been processed by our office, but the start date maybe hasn't passed or it hasn't been approved yet, or the Scholar isn't activated. And then approved is a case that is approved or activated already, like a H-1B or J-1 or E3. And kind of highlighted on the right is the department contact associated with that case. And then I could refer to this as the case page itself. So if I were to click on, say, Cool as a Cucumber, you can get their first name, last name, you see their Penn ID, in the top right, you see an email address, you see their funding or how much their salary is, funding sources if it's a J1, salary if it's an H1B, and sort of all this information here that I just blacked out for privacy reasons. And then we'll discuss the available actions below. But I just want to call out to attention date of birth. Oftentimes, if you are having a scholar or H1B who's having issues accessing our system, I strongly recommend verifying that they have the date of birth correct based on what you submitted. Sometimes, different countries, do month, day, and then or day, month, and we do month, day. So there's often sort of little hiccups like that. And so that's just kind of, we have date of birth here for you to be able to reference, as well as the temp ID up top. If it's a temp ID, that means that we don't have their pen ID and we very likely don't have their pen key. And so those, if you are given a pen ID afterwards, we much prefer a pen ID. I'll talk about that in a future slide though. Oh, and the edit button. I also will talk about the edit button, but these are kind of like the main things. Edit lets you modify certain information on this page, say kind of touching kind of on what Aaron said earlier. If you have an H1B whose physician is changing like their position title, you can modify that using the edit button and we get notified and we'll determine whether or not an amendment is necessary. If the supervisor has changed, you also can use this edit button to modify the supervisor, site of activity. Yeah, those ones are editable. Okay, so this is how to add a new case. So if you already, kind of the biggest thing I just wanted to point out is that if you already have a scholar employee that is associated with your department, you do not need to click add a new case. You can just go to your department and then go to that scholar specifically, and then you can click under the available actions, the relevant request, even if it's, they're already a J1 and you're looking to extend them, you use the J1 scholar request. If they're J1, but you're looking to change their immigration status to H1B, you can then, under available actions, select begin H1B request, and so on and so forth. We really only recommend clicking add a new case if it's a new employee to your department. Otherwise, you will, if you're looking to add a new case and this person's already associated with you, the system, or is already associated in our system actually in general, the system will put your request on hold and it will alert us saying there could be a duplicate, there could be a new case. And it kind of just slows down the process a little bit. If you're kind of in a rush, I just really recommend using the available actions. It's a little bit smoother of experience on your side. So but if you do click add a new case, you go through and you're selecting, the request type, the department, the name. Names are kind of common mistakes. If you do enter a scholar's name incorrectly, you can always reach out to us to update it. Those tend to be some fields that we do request that you double check. Date of birth also can be misentered. And then this last one is kind of, I just want to bring attention to the pen ID. Pen ID is really useful. We are working with Workday to kind of share our immigration information, but there's no way for us, unless you provide the pen ID, or if the scholar reaches out and provides the pen ID, we actually don't get it any sort of other way. So that's really, and that can impact, how they sign in. It's a little bit easier if we have their pen ID. And so when you're going to create a new case, my understanding is once you complete the hiring in Workday for most positions, they generate a pen ID. And if you could use it here, that'd be really great. And we're looking we're working with Workday to potentially make pen ID required. And so right now it's just optional, but for future plans, we might be making it required next year. How to document uploads. This, I think, is just a slide that is more useful if you kind of read on your own. I know it might be just useful for everyone and always, because documents can be pretty unyieldy if you're scanning or taking pictures. And so kind of a big issue is that documents are just too big to upload to our site. You'd be kind of surprised, but it happens for everybody, students as well. And so we kind of have this language that we've been adding to our e-forms and whatnot. Files must be less than 3 megabytes. They can't have characters that the system can't read. So that we always suggest using just letters and numbers. It only accepts a PDF or JPEG. And there's just some tips with Adobe. Unfortunately, there is a known vendor bug, which we are not responsible for. We're hoping that they'll fix soon, is that if you're trying to submit an e-form, but you have saved the e-form as a draft and you uploaded documents first, if you upload documents and saved an e-form as a draft and then try to submit it, it will fail and it'll give you a very not helpful error message about unable to process information. And it's because the system kind of misplaced your uploaded documents when it's saved as a draft. So I just strongly recommend to only upload your documents when you're ready to submit the e-form. Okay, so these are just some tips and tricks for the H-1B e-forms. I know we're a little bit over. So H-1B application has 5 e-forms, e-form 4 and 5. As long as they're not pending with our office, all the previous e-forms 1 through 3 are editable by the department, including e-form 2 with the employee. E-form 4 only becomes available after 1 through 3 are submitted. They're required. And e-form 5 is only available after e-forms 1 through 4 are submitted. E-form 5 has the signed documents from the view/print most recent, which I'll talk about next. And ISSS does not consider the H-1B application received until we receive e-form 5, because that has the department and chair signatures that the position has been verified. Yes, e-form 1 department request form. So even if the employee already works at Penn with a different valid immigration status, but this is the first time you'll be applying for an H-1B for them, the type will be new. E-form 2, the employee data form. So the department fills out a short portion and an employee fills out the rest. There's a lot of documents that have to be uploaded, unfortunately. It's a pretty cumbersome e-form for the employee, and they aren't able to save it as a draft. And it can be a headache. So a lot of departments actually, when they start the H-1B process, they'll actually send out e-form 2 first because they know their employees will need some extra time. And also the biggest login issues we see for employees are related to them trying to use their Penn key. So instead we've kind of, we got that feedback from departments and we've now modified it to have a better login reference photo. So if an H-1B leaves Penn and no longer needs they no longer are eligible for their H-1B status, we will withdraw their petition. And if you're on the case page for approved H-1B, an available action is end of employment, and you will submit that form to us for us to take the necessary action on the H-1B's record. How to save case information. I think this is really useful. A department brought this up to me that, every time they submit an H-1B to our office, they also print a copy for themselves just so they know what information they shared. And so after you submit e-form 4 and before submitting e-form 5, when you're in the e-form, so it looks like this, you can see all the e-forms associated with the group. There's this button up here that says view/save/print e-form group. And when you click that button, it compiles a PDF of every single thing you've submitted, including everything that the employee uploaded, which some departments like to keep on record. Also to know if there's any dependents coming and whatnot, this will be able to capture all of that. And this is actually different than when you're on the case page, the view/print most recent H-1B requests, which is necessary for e-form 5. It seems a little confusing, but I think it's a really useful feature. Some people just save it so they don't have to, reinvent the wheel every time. How to for J1 e-forms, and so kind of similarly for J1s, there's 4 e-forms. E-form 4 is only accessible after 1 through 3 are submitted, and as long as e-form 4 is not pending with our office, all other e-forms can be edited. Even if they're submitted, you can go in and on the bottom it says like edit, you can resubmit. Similar J2 Scholar data form issues apply as an H1B. There are less document uploads, but it's still, I know, a known issue. And the J2 dependent is a separate e-form request that they can submit, that they will have to submit if they're going to request for their dependents to also come. Okay, so this is the export control. So this is on e-form 1, and this is kind of what I referred to earlier. These are the questions related to the screening for visual compliance. There is a section, I think, right above this. You need to have access first before you can do your visual compliance screening. But if you have any questions related to visual compliance, there is an email address in this e-form for export control, and they'll be able to help you out with it. Okay, J1 end of employment. So for an approved J1 scholar, if someone is ending early, there isn't an e-form like there is for H1B because we're not withdrawing. We're actually going to be shortening their DS 2019. So to notify us that they're leaving early, you can click the edit button and then modify the end date. There currently is a bug right now in the system where it's getting a little bit confused for November and December because the months start with 12. But it is going to be fixed within the next week, so that'll be exciting. And this is a really useful feature for how you report J1 end of employment. Yes. Oh yeah, you can't extend using this. You have to submit a whole new application. The system won't let you. Okay, so J1 saving, also very similar to H1B. We recommend for it to kind of make it easier on your side. I recommend just saving a copy of the e-form, especially if you think you might do an extension going forward. For J1s, you actually have two options, unlike H1Bs. You can either click View Save / Print eForm Group, or you can do under View Print Most Recent J1 Scholar Request. It should bring, if this also the scholar is a transfer in, it should bring in the transfer in form. It should bring in all their dependents when you click this button and all their uploaded files. So how to receive documents. So we brought back at high demand the request document shipping, which is a great feature for departments. The department is requesting the document shipping, and on the e-form they indicate what they're looking to have shipped. And the most important thing I will say, because this was actually a surprising headache, is that for our scholar specialists, and I'm sure also for departments, but the shipping labels we were getting in the beginning were all very odd size. So we just request to please make sure the shipping label is like a letter, 8.5 by 11, and that the department is the sender, because once we send it out, the department is responsible for ensuring that it gets there okay, and that way you can also track it. Also, if you prefer, you can do document pickup appointments with our office where you come in to get the documents, and you do have to have a pen key to make an appointment. That's just a pen policy for us. And then also scholars themselves can request document shipping. Yes, so verifications are so you can communicate important updates to our office, which I alluded to earlier, such as supervisor or work location updates. If a department changes, you can also put that in the comments. Most departments actually just email us if a scholar is switching to a different department, because it tends to also be switching department contacts, and that is okay to continue doing. If you have to submit a verification, oh, sorry, I'm realizing I'm speaking out of order. Verification is a button when you're on like the case page and the verification date has passed. If you have to edit it because there's changes kind of that are critical that you need to update, like such as site and supervisor or salary, you can click the edit to do that. If you are increasing the salary over 5%, you must make a comment. There is now a pop-up that will tell you that that's why you're unable to submit, which is really useful. And then if there's no edits that need to be made and you just click on the verification button, you can just click them all, say it looks good, and submit it. Yes, and so this is if it looks good, you can just click everything and then click submit. If you do make edits, you will still need to click the edit button. After you click edit, you will still need to go through and then submit it. Okay, I see that we have 2 Q questions or 3. Erin, do you want to? I will answer Alex Keener's question. I think I know this answer. I guess, Alex, for your question, I would say that my first question would be if whether or not Form 1 has been filled in with their updated dates. But if they have, but they're still showing the dates without the extension, they can still move forward as long as, they're aware of what the actual dates are. It could be depending on the order of which the submission happened. But if eForm 1 is completed and eForm 2 still has the wrong dates, do you mind actually reaching out to me just so I can look at it? That way I can, because it should not be doing that. Thanks. Erin, do you mind taking the other question?
Sure. If you change the end date for a J1 scholar, do we also need to change the amount they are paid in the record? If you're extending them, we need to show proof of funding for the extended period. If you're shortening them, no. We don't need to update their funding amount or decrease their funding amount based on the fact that they're leaving Penn. And you enter the work location, can you enter the street address? Or do you also enter the building and the room number? You can just enter the street address as long as it's accurate. More important though, is that every work location for an H-1B needs to be listed in the petition. So if the person's working at multiple work locations, please let us know every location they'll be working at. If they'll be working 3 days in the office and 2 days at home, we need to list their home address in the petition. So I hope that answers the question. We don't need the specific room number. We just list the street address of the building. For example, oh no, I'm forgetting the name of the big building that everyone in BPP is in. 3400 Civic Center Boulevard. We just list 3400 Civic Center Boulevard. We don't need to list the room number that they're in. But we do need to list all of their work locations if there's more than one. No open questions. All right, well, I think we went a little bit over. That was probably my fault. So thank you guys again for coming today. I hope this was helpful for you. We will be sending the slides around in PDF version. Yeah, again, thanks again for all your questions.
Can you go to the last slide, please? There's just, I'll send it out when we send out the slides, but also this last. Oh yeah, these are if you have questions. The last slide kind of has, we recognize that a lot of the feedback and kind of portions that we include in our webinars, we get from our feedback from you guys. And so, oh, I see, I didn't update the slide. Thank you. So kind of improvements we also make is based on your feedback and kind of issues that you're seeing. So don't be shy about reaching out if you think the system potentially isn't working as expected, or you're running into technical issues, or just if, like kind of as Erin said, if you have any questions about whether or not the right status or the right course of action for people you're looking to bring. But also we would love to know what any sort of specific questions or feedback you have on this presentation specifically. We have this Qualtrics survey that we'll also be sending out, and it's just helpful to make sure, kind of as Erin said, that these are things that we see and that we think that people could use guidance on, but ultimately you're on the other side and kind of where you're looking for more assistance, or you could get more feedback, and so that's useful for us to know, and this is kind of a great way for us to capture that.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I completely agree. As much input as we can get from you guys, it's so helpful. Like I said, we don't process cases from your side, so it's hard for us sometimes to put ourselves in your shoes and see what kind of issues you're experiencing. But we're on the same team, honestly. and we want to make things easier for you. So please let us know how we can help. And if we can implement things that will help you process and will help us process, then we will. So your feedback is invaluable and appreciated. Yeah. So with that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll reach out through email with the slides and with the survey.
Thanks, everybody.